What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you part 6 of our story of Pathfinder Kingmaker series. In this episode, we'll be discussing Chapter 6, War of the River Kings. In between Chapter 5 and Chapter 6, there is really only one interesting thing that happens as we wait for Chapter 6 to start, and that is that Tristan will explain his involvement in opening the portals that the Ancient Curse operates through. So with the Ancient Curse timer that's always in the background of everything we do in this game, after a set period of time, usually between 6 months to a year of in-game time, a portal will open and flood our barony or our kingdom with monsters that kill a bunch of people and cause us problems. And as we learned just last chapter, that Tristan was actually helping Nerissa, the nymph behind most of our troubles. He will take the next passing of the Ancient Curse to explain his involvement in that if he is still alive or with us. And to quickly sum it up, while he's not directly responsible for the monsters coming through, he is responsible for giving Nerissa access to a more stable portal to send forces through, which I thought was interesting, so I figured I'd share it. Now, Chapter 6 properly starts a little while before the beginning of the Ancient Curse Part 6, in which Lindsay will explain that we are being invited to the Rushlight Tournament. The Rushlight Tournament is a kind of festival of sorts held by Pitax, which is a kingdom to our west, which up to this point in the game has sent Tartusio at the beginning of the game to kind of cause all of those problems that he wound up causing in the earlier parts of this series, as well as a few dignitaries of sorts to and from our kingdom. We'll have interacted with them a little bit, and basically all of our encounters are decidedly negative. But now that we've been crowned king, we're invited to this tournament that's held every few years. Now, while you don't actually have to accept the invitation to this kingdom, it is a pretty fun event. And if nothing else, if you go there, you can actually get amazing stuff from the vendors there. There are some very good items that are definitely worth it, especially if you're playing a kineticist. There is a headpiece there that is phenomenal. Once we go to the Rushlight Tournament in the Rushlight Fields of Pitax, now that we're actually able to go there, because up to this point, if you tried to enter Pitax, you would have been turned away. But upon arriving, we'll be greeted by King Irovetti, who is immediately described as being kind of gross, in my opinion. So they describe him as like having greasy hair and like oily stains and stuff all over his clothes, and just generally kind of a gross, not well-kept dude. But anyways, as the tournament carries on, we can explore the grounds, kind of interact with a few people, but mostly we need to talk to Nunzio Arpea to actually kick off the tournament. And it consists of 2 text events, which you can pass or fail, which will result in you either winning those particular branches of the tournament or not. And then there is the melee, which is the last event of the tournament. Now the melee, unless you are a monk who is spec'd into fist fighting, you're probably not going to win this unless your difficulty's impossibly low, because it is a bare knuckle brawl in which you have no armor on. So very difficult to win unless you're actually spec'd into unarmed for whatever class you're playing. But after this happens, King Irovetti will hold a speech to announce the winner of the tournament if you don't just leave outright. And throughout this speech, he will basically try to humiliate you and talk, trash about your kingdom. And you can attempt to pass diplomacy checks to circumvent this happening. And then the winner will be announced, which, may or may not be you. And then you can head back to your capital after that. Now, this is where a few different things start to happen here. And not necessarily in a ton of order, but I will try to make it make sense as best I can. But keep in mind, the next few events might not necessarily happen consecutively. So after some time passes, you'll eventually be contacted by Lindsay again upon visiting your throne room. And she will explain that gangs of bandits have been raiding your kingdom from the Pitax side of the border. Monsters have just been randomly appearing throughout the entire of your kingdom, going crazy until they're put down, as well as bards from Pitax sowing dissent at your borders. Now, Lindsay points out the obvious in that King Irovetti is clearly responsible for this. He brought you to the Rushlight Tournament to kind of sum up, you as a ruler. And instead of attacking you outright with armies, he's trying to sow discord through your kingdom, which he's pretty successfully doing at this point. Interestingly enough, if you attended the Rushlight Tournament The severity of this will actually vary a little bit depending on how well you handled yourself at the event, and of course depending on which of the checks you passed. Like, did you win the tournament? Did you successfully pass the checks to call Irovetti on his trash talk? Things like that. So what this ultimately boils down to is solving 3 separate problems, dealing with the bards, the bandits, and the monsters being teleported in. Now you can take care of this in 2 ways, and I highly recommend one of them. Basically, each one of these problems is a specific little icon on the world map in Pitax. So all you really have to do is go there, find where it is, and then handle the associated problem at the associated place. Alternatively, if you don't want to explore Pitax, you can use your kingdom management screen if you're playing on not auto mode to solve events that will basically kind of tell you where this stuff is coming from. They'll investigate kind of stuff. I highly recommend that you actually just go explore Pitax because it's way faster than kingdom management. Because the other side of this coin is, while each of these things are going on, you will be getting problem event cards if you're not playing on auto mode for your kingdom management, where basically all the problems they're causing are causing, actual problems for your kingdom that you as the ruler need to solve. And the longer that takes, the more problems you're more likely to fail, thus causing you a great deal of issues. So with those things in mind, let's start with dealing with the bards, because you can actually learn about the bards at the Rushlight tournament. You can talk to Anamid Bellavara, as well as the headmaster of the Academy of Arts that King Irovetti has installed in his kingdom of Pitax. Because apparently, King Irovetti was actually a bard before he became king. But at the Rushlight tournament, we can learn that King Irovetti is using his Academy of Arts basically more as a disinformation and propaganda machine than actually patroning the arts through it. And we'll learn at the tournament that this is happening in Little Town. So while we're exploring Pitax, we can actually find Little Town if it hasn't been marked on our map already from that conversation at the tournament. Now once you go there, you'll have to kill all of the bards and Pitax soldiers that are hanging around the inside part of the town, and then you can head to the inn where you can pass a diplomacy check if you learned about things at the Rushlight tournament to potentially turn some of the bards to your favor. There is also a required, I believe it is neutral option to do the same thing. And then you'll have to fight whoever's left that doesn't agree. Once this is dealt with, the bards sowing discord by, slanderizing your kingdom will have been dealt with. That brings us to the bandits. This one is actually incredibly simple. You go find their bandit hideout, which I believe is the Riverblades camp, and you go kill them all. Real easy peasy stuff. Now they try to offer a little bit of explanation as to why these bandits are doing it, but they're bandits. You go there, you kill all of them. 1 or 2 of them will try to explain that Irovetti gave them no choice. He tracked them down and told them they either had to attack your kingdom or he'd kill them. But it's they're bandits. And also, he's not personally there. There's not soldiers with them. They could have literally just came to you and been like, hey, he's paying us to try to take out your kingdom. And then you could have sent them on their way or something. My point is, I don't really buy this excuse. I think it's weak storytelling, to be honest. Nonetheless, bandits are attacking, you kill them, problem solved. I do want to mention that if you spared one of the Stag Lord's lieutenants who begs for his life at the Stag Lord Fortress, he's actually with these group of bandits. So just something worth noting, I guess. And that brings us to the monsters that are popping up everywhere. As we explore Pitax, we can find a cave where there are a bunch of monsters guarding the place. And as we make our way through, we will eventually find the gnome from actually Jubilost's side quest. I cannot pronounce these gnomes' names, and I'm not even going to try. But you will have potentially met him before. And basically, gnomes in Pathfinder are subject to what they call the bleaching, where essentially they have to keep searching out new and exciting experiences, or they literally kind of turn white and die. It's known as the bleaching. So this particular gnome has taken great fun in setting up a magical teleportation ring, in which case, he's teleporting all of these monsters into your kingdom from here. So you kill all the monsters, kill him, because he will attack you regardless, and then that will take care of the monsters. While that does solve all the initial problems facing our kingdom, At this point, we can head back to our capital, and before we can actually do anything else, this next part has to happen. And I'm not wild about it because it feels a little out of sequence, but nonetheless, it is the way that it is required to be played, so here we are. Potentially, you will have already gotten this quest up to this point, but I feel like this is the best place to mention it. When you return to your capital at some point during all this, you'll probably be confronted by Lindsay and a guy named the Storyteller, who's a guy who's been with you the whole game. You turn in relics to him, he tells you stories about the history of the Stolen Lands. Well, Lindsay and the Storyteller have found a way to use bardic magic to enter Nyrissa's dreams, where you can, learn more about her and what she's after, her goals and motives. So they will ask you to use kingdom resources to prepare for the ritual, which results in a kingdom event, which on auto is, pretty much immediate. And then once that is done, you can go speak to the Storyteller to begin this sequence where you enter Nyrissa's dreams and you learn a lot about her. Now, this is actually a pretty cool quest. I enjoyed this quite a bit. So it starts with a small rehash of what we learned in Chapter 3, that Nyrissa was cursed by an eldest of the First World for doing something that we're not really sure of at this point in time. However, she seems to have stolen something, as the eldest puts it, and cursed her. And we learn right here that she was required to destroy 1,000 kingdoms. And for each one, it would fill a cup, a magical cup called the Apology, with grains of dust for each kingdom destroyed. And the Lantern King demanded she do this literally 1,000 times. And at that point, she would be forgiven her trespass, which we learned very shortly after this, so I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, was apparently that she was like Queen of the Nymphs at one point, and she aspired to become an eldest herself. And she challenged the eldest's power. And the eldests are like just shy of gods. They're not true gods, but they're very powerful. And they don't like that power being questioned or challenged. So they sent one of their big servants to fight Nyrissa, and she lost, thus leading to the curse. Now, as again we learned in Chapter 3, something was taken from Nyrissa when this happens. And this is where we learn exactly what it is, and I can take some time to talk about the Briar. So what was taken from Nyrissa when she was cursed was literally her ability to love. The eldest gave it a physical form, and thus it became the Briar, and then he hid it somewhere in the Stolen Lands. And that's the primary thing we learn from this dream sequence. Now, coincidentally, if you have a good aligned character, it is possible to go slightly deeper in this dream and learn more from Nyrissa, which helps if you're going after the secret ending quite a bit. However, it is not required. It does make it easier, though. And we will be talking about the Briar again in a little bit more detail in just a little bit at a separate part of this video. In the last part of this dream, we get a little bit more detail about what Nyrissa's been doing, where basically she's just been manipulating people like ourselves, the Stag Lord, King Irovetti, actually, Armag from Chapter 5, into creating kingdoms, and then she destroys them to fill her Apology cup. But more importantly, we learn that she's very close to finishing it. She only needs 2 more grains of dust now. And if you're keeping count, that's your kingdom and King Irovetti's kingdom. So she's planning on letting you two duke it out. And because she, likes a good laugh, she decides to go tell you in this dream sequence, when she kind of like lucid dreams and realizes that you're in her dreams, tells you that Irovetti rose to power quite suddenly through a terrible act, and she tells you where to go learn about it, the White Rose Abbey. Now, obviously, she's the one that orchestrated this and knows all about what happened because, again, King Irovetti is working for her, if we hadn't figured that out up to this point already. At this point, we can exit the dream and we can go explore White Rose Abbey. White Rose Abbey is a very tiny map in the upper corner of Pitax. So, again, very small little map area. It's literally just a straight shot. There's kind of a big fight, some traps, and you'll fight a guy named the Gardener at the end of it in front of this fancy-looking little prison cell. If we break that prison cell, we can talk to a Nereid named Evindra. Evindra was actually just in the dream that we were in. So, Evindra was one of, as she calls herself, Nyrissa's cousins. Evindra, upon being freed, explains that Nyrissa has told Irovetti that you're coming for him and have discovered his big secret, and that the big secret is in the lake right next to Evindra. Evindra will also express interest in coming to your capital to help you discover ways to free Nyrissa from her curse. You can choose to do this, you can let her go, or you can kill her. I don't recommend killing her because there's like literally no reward. The experience is awful. She has like 1 gold on her. Pretty much a waste of time unless you just want to do it for the sake of doing it. If you invite her to your capital, talking to Avendra at your capital is where you can learn a lot of the information about exactly what it is Nyrissa did to the eldest, which I already explained just a bit ago. So if you already have that knowledge, you can just turn her away and it doesn't really make much of a difference. However, after this conversation, we can dive into the river, or the lake rather, in this little cave behind us, and we will find out what King Irovetti's secret is. King Irovetti had a bunch of the noble families of Pitax children murdered. It would seem that he used this event to rapidly rise to power. Basically, he killed a bunch of people and took over the resulting power vacuum. Now, at this point, we have nothing else to do, really, so we head back to our capital, where we should be greeted with a kingdom event in our throne room, where the ambassador from Pitax, Stefano Monsconi, something like that, shows up in your throne room and basically tells you that King Irovetti knows all about how terribly things are going in your barony from the events that he caused, and invites you to come to Pitax to surrender your crown and submit to him under his new rule. You can respond to this and, basically say like, yeah, all right, I'll be there. Or you can have Stefano here murdered, which I recommend you do, because if you don't kill him here, you will have to fight him in just a little bit. You don't have a choice. He will fight you. However, if you kill him here, your guards will take him away, and it's one less powerful guy you gotta fight later. So I recommend killing him right here, because you don't even have to fight him. So then we make our way to the capital of Pitax. Now when we arrive at Pitax, you actually want to take this opportunity to go around town and talk to people, because we can use the secrets we just learned about the noble families of Pitax and talk to their leader, and convince the nobles to support our fight with King Irovetti. We can also talk to the captain of the guard and potentially even convince her to help us out. So basically, you just want to take this opportunity to talk to some of these people and try to bring them over to your side. And when you're ready, go confront King Irovetti in front of his palace, where he'll basically ask you to surrender, as I mentioned. And funnily enough, you can actually do that. You can surrender your crown. If you do that, it's just a game over. That's all that happens. Now, obviously, we're going to fight King Irovetti. Now, a small scene will play out right in front of the palace where the small factions of Pitax will declare their allegiance to either you or Irovetti, and then you'll have to win the resulting fight that can, be of varying difficulties depending on whether or not people are on your side or not. And then we can enter King Irovetti's palace. This palace is actually really cool. It's a small dungeon. It's not super large by any means. However, there's a couple different ways to tackle it. There's a little event at the front gate where some of the guards try to kill you, but you just put them down real fast. It always struck me as an odd event because, obviously they're going to try to kill you, but they decided to give it a bunch of dialogue for seemingly no reason. But from here, we can either rush straight forward, which will get us ambushed by a ton of people, or we can explore to the left and right of the entrance, which will allow us to slowly and systematically kill a bunch of people guarding the palace. We can find secret rooms that have backup enemies, just waiting around in them, that if we were to run straight up and confront Irovetti when the fight starts, all of them would come pouring out. So if you go up the sides, you can discover those rooms, as well as a lot of other cool stuff in the palace. Some stuff's not related to the fight with Irovetti, but exploring gives you an opportunity to find hidden rooms, open locked doors that allow you to confront one-on-one some of the stronger lieutenants and things Irovetti summons, thus making the actual fight with him much easier, which I highly recommend you do, especially on higher difficulties. Also, a weird random thing, I don't know, because this has actually never happened in any of my other playthroughs, every single person in this palace right here just beelined for Tristan this time. I don't know what I did differently exactly, but the AI would just not leave Tristan alone. All of them. Even if I put Tristan on the other side of the map in here, and then engaged in enemies, they would completely ignore the people right in front of them and go running across the castle to go attack Tristan. I don't know, it was just very strange. I've never seen that before. I don't know if that was a bug or what, but it was a kind of fun little anecdote, so I figured I'd mention it to you guys. Now, eventually, you're going to come to the fight with King Irovetti himself. You'll have a short conversation where a fight will ensue. Now, before that fight ensues, you can ask him what the deal with Tartusio was all about. And he will very quickly explain that Tartusio was simply trying to help him find the Briar. And spoiler alert, he found it. The artifact that Tartusio recovered from under the old sycamore was in fact the Briar, the physical manifestation of Nirissa's ability to love. King Irovetti, while maybe not the most morally upright guy, isn't an idiot, if nothing else, and he realized that Nirissa was planning on killing him in some way, so he was trying to find leverage on her. And he was using Tartusio to do that. And Tartusio, surprisingly enough, managed to actually find the Briar, which he then transported to Irovetti in the portal scene that we saw in, I believe it was chapter 1 or part 1 of this series. But as we're killing Irovetti, chances are you'll see this scene play out where he calls in Ingledis, which is like a Naga, and then he'll attempt to command her using the Briar. However, at this point, Nirissa will more than likely come into this fight, chastise Irovetti for trying to keep the Briar from her, and then sick Ingledis on Irovetti, who will kill him, and then you'll be forced to deal with Ingledis, which is usually an easy fight. She actually has a heal ability that's really strong that she'll use over and over again, even on normal mode, so you kind of got to be prepared to deal with that, but otherwise, she's not that difficult. And upon finishing this fight, that will actually wrap up what we need to do for the chapter. But I want to talk about something else. In the last chapter, I spoke about how Nirissa was after something she wasn't able to find, and that she was using the Oculus of Abaddon to find it. Well, what she was trying to find, as you might have pieced together by now, is the Briar. If Nirissa is allowed to get her hands on the Oculus of Abaddon in any way, she finds the Briar. She knows that King Irovetti has it before we do, and then she will go find it and then have it replaced with a very sophisticated replica, resulting in the scene we just saw. Now, in order to free Nirissa from her curse, which is the actual secret ending I've been slowly hinting at throughout this series, you need the Briar. It is required. If she gets her hands on it first, you can still find it. It's just very difficult. We'll talk about that in probably the next part, actually. If we are able to meet the requirements to have Tristan destroy the Oculus instead of stealing it from Vorticai to begin with, then Nirissa will never learn the location of the Briar, and thus the Briar that we find on Irovetti's corpse will be the real Briar, which again makes the secret ending a little easier, which might save you a headache or two. So, after this, we will have officially conquered Pitax. We can return to our capital, where either through kingdom management or the auto scenes, we will be able to deal with the resulting aftermath of Pitax, assign a new governor, deal with the city guard, deal with the Thieves Guild there, which is kind of like the bandits and stuff, and basically decide how we want to run the kingdom of Pitax. Now, after this, the only thing left to do is finish out Ancient Curse Part 6. Part 7 is actually just a freebie part of the curse. You will have the entire timer of Part 7 to explore and focus on kingdom management, which is a great time to wrap up things like achievements. Now, what I actually recommend you do is the explore part of that. Finish out exploring. Now, ideally, up to this point, you'd only have one part of the map left, which is a place called Thousand Voices, which Part 7 is a great time to explore that instead of right after Part 7, because Part 7 is the last part of the Ancient Curse. At the end of Part 7, the end of the game is kind of thrown towards you. Not the end, there's actually still quite a bit of content left, but it's less about kingdom management and more about a narrative to the end of the game. That will be the next part of this series, which is why I'm explaining it here. I hope you guys are looking forward to it. Thank you so much for watching this video. It truly does help and it means a lot to me. So again, thank you. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.